Hey, Matt. Hey, Mike. You guys look nice in those pants. Today on the Man Space. Welcome to the Man Space podcast. We're your hosts, Doctors Matt Brown and Rob Porter, and clinical therapist Mike Porter. Welcome, Spacemen, to an episode where we just build each other up. You guys are spectacular. Did you guys have to pause? Did it just freeze?
That was
big.
some awesome.
You guys also froze on me.
Could totally hear you all through Matt's, and then it cut in.
Then you were in.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Anyway.
Here we are.
Riverside puts the host last. Anybody looking to purchase Riverside, be aware.
Man.
We're like the anti-Riverside commercial.
Yeah.
Now,
Do you think they'd get on here? Like they're listening in and maybe they'll offer us some cool stuff?
I'm sure.
Like free delays?
Like things that, here's a product that works. We'll show you Riverside. Not like my trusty Dr. Pepper Zero.
Cherry Zero.
Wait.
Cherry Zero. Huh?
Oh,
Yeah.
I always want cherry.
Have you ever had the Cherry Zero?
Yes.
They're good.
Yeah, I love it.
I think it's a lot better because I don't know what it is about the just straight Dr. Pepper Zero, but it bloats the crap out of me. And the cherry just...
Dr. Pepper.
the cherry goes down smooth, I guess.
You guys are making this episode hard to just build you guys up. Matt's talking about Dr. Pepper Zero
I'm getting
bloats.
bloated by Dr. Pepper Zero.
Oh.
I seriously though, I could only ever finish half a bottle of the regular Dr. Pepper Zero, but put a little cherry in.
Takes all the bloating
Speaking
out.
of, Mike, you've got some. That should be the little advertisement on the cherry syrups. No bloating.
Now with
I thought you were
less
about to
blood.
say, speaking of which, Mike, you look like you're bloated. I thought you were talking about no bloating. Hey, Mike, looks like you're not as bloated as you used to be.
You drinking cherry, Dr. Pepper, Mike?
That'd be hilarious. Have you lost weight? Well, I have been drinking cherry Dr. Pepper
Cherry.
Zero.
Oh,
You've
that
got
must
big news
bloated.
about cherry, though, Mike.
Yes.
That's what it was. Wait.
Tarani syrup now makes a sugar-free cherry, which means I can finally get my Code Red.
Why don't they make Code Red Zero? They make everything in
Because
zero.
there's. You want to know the funniest thing? I think you're the one who showed me.
They
the
got
very
it by
first
Baja Blast
commercial-
Zero.
Well, the first commercial when they started advertising and saying we're going to do zeros, they showed I think 4 flavors of zero, and Code Red was one of them, and it's never.
And it
come.
never materialized. The Baja Blast. They might as well just write Mountain Dew Cat Piss Zero.
Dude, that stuff is good. You don't like it?
Oh, I
It's
hate
so
it.
limey.
Man. Yeah.
It's like straight
good.
lime.
I just drank some yesterday. Taco Bell.
They're opening a Maverick. They're opening Mavericks here.
Wow, really?
Yeah, we have a gas station
Drink store.
called
Sorry,
Come
David.
and Go.
Oh, yeah, I know those ones.
I've seen those.
Yeah.
KUM.
Yeah, KUM, Come and Go. And apparently Maverick has purchased them all and announced that they will be changing the name.
That's too bad.
So there will be no more Come and Goes in Missouri.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they also redo the inside of the store.
Yeah.
Some Mavericks are actually, you truly do feel like you're on an adventure when you walk inside.
This episode's also brought to you by Maverick.
There's like mountain murals as you're going to the bathroom.
As a side note, I was thinking about this because Matt, we've talked about comments that we get on YouTube. And I guess this is a question for you, Mike. Matt can't answer this. How often would you say you get some? Because we had a comment on YouTube, something along the lines of making fun of us for being bald.
Although did you see the other comment about that?
No.
I think it was on one of the shorts where it went like
Oh, is it
from
like?
bottom to top,
Oh, it said something about you guys are like a thing for hair regrowth or something like that.
like a commercial for the progression of hair growth product or something.
Which cracked me up because I'm like, what's the progression? It's like bald and not bald.
Well, I think it was like maybe
hat.
Mike's 5 o'clock head shadow was showing a little bit more.
That could be.
But here's what I wonder, Mike. Do you feel like I get clients periodically who will make fun of me? They'll be like, "Well, you're bald," and I'll be like, "Oh," and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I feel like, you really think I care? I've been bald for like 25 years.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I get it all the time that someone, then it's like always, it's kind of like if my name was like, I don't know, I'm now drawing a blank from Scrubs, Dude Meister. And I was like, hey, guys ever call you Dude Meister? It's like, yes, everybody calls me Dude Meister. Like, it's like they think they just came up with this thing like, has anyone ever told you a joke about you being bald? I feel like, yes, like probably every day of my life. I do it.
I used to get it a lot more when I was teaching because 8-year-olds.
Little kids, yeah.
Yeah. Like,
What's that say about my clients?
you're bald. And I'd be like, yeah, I know, guys. Thanks.
I love it when like an observation is an insult in their minds. Some kid told me that in I don't know, like second grade. Like, dude, your last name's a color. And I was like, yes, it is.
Your last name's a color. Your last name's Dude Meister.
It's a wicked burn.
So
No,
here's
clients. They don't ever. Like, I'm more likely to make a bald joke than they are.
yeah. I get clients to do it all the time. Maybe I make fun of myself a ton, so maybe I started it. But here's something that makes me wonder about our topic today, because I actually have this. I have a couple clients who do this, but I have a client that feels particularly socially insecure or anxious. And every time we have a session, if I didn't stop this client, they would spend the entire session finding ways to make fun of me. Which I don't. I'm like, okay.
Like, do they ever talk about themselves?
What I make them, like I'll pull them back around. But otherwise, if I say something the wrong way, they'll be like, "What was that?" Which, admittedly, I do to people. I do it to myself a ton. Like, but it's fast, and I have with this particular client, I feel like, oh, this is like you have perceived. This is just my guess, as an like when you were growing up, you were an outsider outside those circles of like dudes who were friends, and you'd see them making fun of each other. So you decided that's what dudes do. They make fun of each other.
Mm.
Like you get together and you tear each other down. You like rib each other and whatever. And so I think he's just doing what he thinks he's supposed to be doing. But sometimes it's done in ways where it's like, well, that kind of came. And a couple of times he's been like, oh, like I don't have. I'm like, oh, okay. Like doesn't hurt my feelings. I'm like, wow, you jumped over there. He's like, oh, sorry, was that too far? Like you can tell he doesn't know the boundary line.
Yeah.
Of whatever that boundary line is. But I do think it's actually that, Matt, when you brought up this topic, I thought I was looking up because I thought, oh, that's interesting. I think most of the time, most men I know, I shouldn't say most men, there's a lot of men I know where they spend time, you make fun of each other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you I don't know, relate.
Yeah.
It's how you keep a safe distance of like, we fart on each other and we make fun of each other.
Well, and I think part of it is, I think it's kind of a way to gauge like how uptight or what kind of sense of humor do they have. Because to me, I don't know. It's an easy way to gauge it. If they're going to laugh, then okay, I want to interact more with you. If they're not going to laugh, then it's going to be a rough relationship because I'm going to say a lot of stuff and you're never going to laugh at it. So,
and if you're not laughing at me, we're not friends.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's how it goes with me.
Well, do you want me to read the quote?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it's short, so I don't need to read it, I guess. This is like probably been on social media in like a bunch of different iterations of it. But the first part's always the same, which is men are happiest when they're building something. And then there's like any number of different lists of things as examples. But there's like some that say a physique or a body, a family, a business, a building, wealth, whatever. So, yeah, we were talking about like maybe adding to that list people, building the people around you. And maybe, I don't know, we can talk about people in general, but like when you're talking about men just kind of cutting each other down, like, can you guys think of a time where a man paid you a genuine compliment?
Yeah, I mean, not like I know it's happened. There have been times where I feel like, wow, thank you. But suddenly I'm drawing a blank.
Had a real big impact. Yeah.
I think, well, actually, I mean, this is a whole other thing we've talked about a little bit before, but I think sometimes I don't know it has the impact it should because the negatives stand out more than the positives.
Yeah.
Like if someone says, "Hey, you're really good at this," or "I really admire this about you," we can easily dismiss that as like, "Yeah, whatever."
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably why it's harder for me to say yes. Well,
Mm-hmm.
Mike, you were thinking while I talked a whole bunch. Did you come up with something?
No, I mean, like I think I have the benefit of having just moved and having left a place where we lived for 13 years and established some pretty significant relationships. And so on leaving, there was a lot of kind of sharing with one another the impact we've had. And so, like, yeah, um, it happens, but it's not an everyday thing for sure. I think it takes something significant, a birthday, a moving, the birth of a child, like something significant for us to go up to another dude and say, "Hey, like, I really look up to you," or "I really appreciate this about you," or "I really whatever." I think just on a Tuesday, we're probably not doing it.
But now I feel like either A, it doesn't happen near enough, or B, I'm not noticing enough, which makes me feel like a jerk. I don't know how I answer that question.
I think I'm more inclined to say it's not happening enough. Like
I feel like, go ahead.
we've talked about my friend, Mike, who is like he's one of the most openly expressive men I've ever met. The very first time I met him, he came up, hugged me, wrapped a leg around me while he's doing it. And he said, he's like, "I got to try this on for size." And then he went ahead and wrapped his other leg around me.
Was he just floating?
Oh yeah, like not very long. Mike is about my size, so like no, that it was just a quick one. But I think that's Mike. Like that's just kind of who he is. He will tell someone he loves them. He doesn't care how uncomfortable it makes him. He's the guy who would come up and found it super hilarious to kiss me on my head, because he knew it made people uncomfortable and he didn't care. Frequently when we would see each other, we would kiss one another on the cheek because he made people comfortable expressing. Like I could watch people who knew him over the course of time, watch them become more openly expressive with love. He, I think, was very good at it. He was one of the guys at the lunch we've talked about on here before. Rob came with me and Mike and another one of our friends and left saying, "Is it like that all the time with you guys?" And I was like, "Yeah, pretty much." And he was like, I don't know, like that's not normal.
Because it was just compliments and support.
Yeah, because we just kind of lifted each other up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And admittedly, I can't think of many relationships where that was the standard. I've had a couple more since, for sure. But at the time, no, it even stood out to me that it was a very different form of relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's kind of this, I'm having this like existential moment of like, oh man, this is kind of depressing to me. Like, does this not happen? Like,
well, I don't think it doesn't, because obviously you're saying, sharing some examples of when it did, but I think there is maybe too much of a reliance on the idea that you build men up by tearing them down and they build themselves back up.
Yeah.
And I definitely think there are times where I have felt that, like from coaches and things like that, where it's like my desire to perform to their expectations would drive me. But even in the rebuke, I would feel like I'd feel from them a belief in my capabilities. It's like they wouldn't waste time talking to me about this if they didn't think I could do it, right? So it was kind of like a challenge with a warm embrace at the same time. But yeah, I don't think that we just... I was thinking a lot like the average man, and maybe that's not even a good person to think of. Maybe like a guy who is trying really hard and is constantly telling himself in his own mind all the areas that he's failing. And then most of what he hears from other people in his life is where he's failing, or it's just neutral. And paired with that, kind of like an increasingly common perception that if a guy responds positively to or seeks praise, he's a narcissist.
Yeah.
Instead of like he's a human being and we all like encouragement
And need it. Yeah.
Yeah, and need it to kind of like sometimes quiet the voice in our own head. I just wonder for guys like that, like what would happen if they just got a like, hey man, you're doing a good job, right? Or like I see you and I see your effort, and I see all the areas where really you're doing for others, but you're not talking about it. You're just sacrificing and trying, and maybe you're doing it in like a really uninformed way because you're so bent on getting it right that you haven't really asked people what they need. You're just trying to like perceive needs and meet them, and then feel really upset when you don't. But like for guys like that, like what's the impact of just like some encouragement, and maybe particularly from other guys? I don't know. I mean, I think that obviously it's really impactful from the women that we love too. But if we're sitting here thinking like, I can't remember the last time that happened to me, or maybe Mike, you're saying this was a regular thing for you, but like when was the last time you felt to say it to somebody else? I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities that, going back to that quote, I have felt really happy when I am genuinely complimenting guys around me. I felt really happy I felt really happy when guys have said things to me and I've been able to say, thanks. That really means a lot to me. Right. Instead of like dismissing it, like all of us oftentimes do with compliments, but, so I don't know where I'm going with that, but
I'll tell you where.
all those.
Mike will go first, and then I'll go. Fine.
No, I was going to say, I can say for myself, I feel to do it more often than I do it. Like on a handful of occasions, even with the two of you, I have felt like extremely lucky, stupid, to know the two of you and to be able to do this. You guys have been a significant part of my growth the last few years and a significant source of comfort for me. Oh, I can tell you the number of times I've felt it and not said anything way outnumber the times I've ever said anything even remotely close to it. And certainly I think I can count like one or two times where I've said it that as much as I just did. And some of it is I've had experiences where I've said, no, I'm going to say it and I'm going to go do it. And the guy looks at me like I'm an idiot. Like, and I'm just like, okay, sorry. Like, I guess I won't say those things anymore.
Well, don't do it now. You just said it, man. No, I really appreciate that. Like I feel the same way. Like especially like when you said the comfort, right? Like I think we've all kind of been through difficult things in different ways as we've done this. And, the stuff that happens off mic, off the air,
Behind
the conversations we've had, right? Like, those have been super meaningful for me too. And yeah, I think it has been the man space.
Yeah.
It's been a place where I have felt like I can say what I'm thinking and feeling, and I can't think of a time where you guys did that. Like what you said, where it's like, oh,
right.
Okay, well,
Looked at you like you're an idiot.
Yeah.
I always worry that because I think, Mike, when you said that, I thought, I remember, I think I get the glimpses of that in like a hindsight perspective. Like one day driving home and thinking, in like 10 years when this is done or whenever it is, I'm going to look back and think that was the best time of my career. And so I can get these like snippets where it feels like, oh, this means a lot to me. I'm going to miss this. But when you say that stuff, my first thought was, that's because I probably crap on you as soon as you say it. You'll say something big, whoa, man, slow down. And I think I missed the moment of just, it's not only being willing to accept the compliment, like what you're saying, man. I've worked a lot on that. If someone says, hey, I like that, I like that jacket, or that was a really good talk, or whatever, to say thanks. Or to say, thanks, I really liked it, or I really enjoyed it, or like, that's one thing. I think it's another thing to like also accept, like Mike, your compliment wasn't your building us up was not just saying, hey, you guys look nice in those pants.
Mm-hmm.
You're actually saying, you were opening up the opportunity for, I'm saying something nice about you and building you up and opening up this space where we could go further. And it creates a different kind of openness and in the moment of why I would look back and think, oh, I wish I could do that more. I miss that thing that we used to do. I think that sometimes is hard for men to accept of like, well, are we just going to go deeper here on a Tuesday afternoon? Like, what happens next? Like, so it's like, well, anyway, let's go to the drink store, you know? Like, so it does make me wonder, like when you said that and Matt, you had a very good, honest response just to say, I appreciate that. Like, that means a lot to me that you would say that. Not that you have to reciprocate and say back, well, let me also say my thing too, but just to say that means a lot to me. I've also been wondering, like, not only how do I receive it, but, and maybe this is just my personality of actually feeling like if someone's unhappy, I probably did this. What did I do to make this happen? Which can be a real, I guess, pros and cons inside of a relationship. But I wonder, like, why don't I do this more? How come men don't in general, I guess, or I start with me, like, why don't I say to somebody, hey, you're really good at this, or I've really admired this about you? I think, Mike, what you're describing is if I just say it to somebody and we're not that close, would they be like, thanks, man? And then the
Well, and the weird
conversation
thing
stops.
to me is like when I think about, I mean, I guess to answer that in a roundabout way,
Ooh, sweet.
the weird thing to me, like the men in my life that have done nothing but like cheer me on, in my eyes are like the manliest men.
Yeah.
But for some reason we're like, well, that's not the manly thing to do, right? Like I think we think the manly thing to do is let me watch out for and like point out all the things that you're doing that are wrong or that you're going to embarrass yourself by or that you're an idiot for thinking like but I think that's just us projecting our own fear onto each other where it's like, oh cool, he's the guy that looks like a moron, let's point him out. Like,
yeah, there's like an inherent, not even competition, but it is competition to make sure that you're not the worst one in the group.
Yeah.
Right. Push others down. And I don't think it's always super malicious. Sometimes
I don't think
it's
it's
just
malicious
like,
even.
Sometimes it's our verbal way of like wrestling around on the ground with each other.
Yeah.
Like you did as little boys, right? But no, I think that I guess if that's how we're like constantly thinking, that's a reflection obviously of what we're thinking about ourselves too. And I think to be able to look outward at people in a way where you're trying to build them up, you can see brokenness everywhere. Like,
oh man,
I mean, not just in men, obviously, but like I'm speaking specifically about men, but like you can see where men feel broken and are like filling in the gaps with all sorts of just unhelpful, if not damaging things. And like, why are we not like filling the gap ourselves with just like an encouraging, you've got this. And I think maybe we spend too much time trying to watch for the cracks in our own lives and stepping over them. But I think that's why I think the men that in my life that have been the most encouraging are men that have shored up those gaps in their own lives enough that that's the way they view the world now. It's like, I know that beating myself up or looking at where I'm broken or, talking to myself that way gets me nowhere. And what I've done is I have like been compassionate with myself. I've pushed myself and I feel good about myself. And now I have like a living experience type of knowledge that tells me that's what builds things. Right. So let me go build this. Let me go build this. And like the types of comments those guys give you, or you feel like, yeah, I believe you. Right. When they say it about you, you're like, I didn't believe that about myself until you said it, but I know who you are and I know how whole you are as a man. And I'm like, okay, I can't reject that. Right. Like, I think that's a huge source of building, but I think probably one of the biggest barriers is that we are just looking out for the cracks all the time. Yeah. In ourselves and in others.
Like, I think my failure to do so comes from my own insecurities. Like my brain says, if I tell somebody in this room that you are really amazing at this, then it must mean I'm not. or that you're better than me, or that or that you don't need me or something. Now that's not always the case. It's kind of funny because I can see where if I feel like this person needs me or they need something, then I can kind of step in and it's easier to do because I'm taking care of you. But if it's just coming to a room where it's like, hey, I just saw this thing and I really admired this in you, and I think you should know that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little harder for me because of insecurities.
Yeah.
I don't mean to say I never do it. I want to do it, but I think I'm like you, Mike, where it's like, I don't do it enough.
Yeah.
I think you're right too about that whole thing. Like a whole person can say this sort of thing, and a whole like they're complete or something, but just kind of they've really done a lot of work to say I'm okay with, where I am, where I'm trying to go, perceptions of me or not, like that's not my control, and so that's not where my focus is. And I think it takes somebody who has been willing to do that. I think sometimes people believe I am willing to do that. And sometimes I'm like, oh, you don't really know. I'm actually pretty afraid of doing that kind of work.
Like what? Just complimenting people?
No, the kind of work to get to the point like where it feels like maybe this is the way I take this. Like I walk into a room and I'm confident enough with myself that I don't worry about me when I walk into the room. So I can actually be in the moment with somebody and see something I observe or I admire or I appreciate, and I could say, hey, I really like this. And I'm not thinking about how I'll sound if I say it or if I'm the smartest or the funniest in the room. Like the kind of work, and I don't even think I don't think that has to be necessary that everyone's done a deep dive into themselves in order to compliment other people. I think the more you start to compliment other people genuinely, and not just like nice shirt, but that's not a bad one either. But I think the more you do that, the more confidence you gain in yourself. I think it does achieve that building something, that you are building other people and therefore yourself. And even, I mean, you could say people in general, but you could say the brotherhood, of men, like, let's make each other better by highlighting what is good.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can do that. I think there's a part of me that I tend to focus sometimes too much on what you're describing. I see the holes and I think, oh, okay, I have to fix that hole before I start doing this other thing. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying, we'll do the other thing, the hole will probably take care of itself.
Yeah.
Well, that's this idea, right? The idea of the man that's whole, I think, it doesn't necessarily mean he's got all his cracks or his holes filled, but he knows where they are and he's okay with it. Like, yep, those are still things I'm working on. But that realization, and this is one that's come up, like we've talked about it on here before. Like I will openly say, I think Rob is funnier than I am. And for a long time. How do I say
I appreciate that? I appreciate that I am funnier than you.
For a long time.
Said it. It's good.
Yeah. See, there you go, buddy. No, for a long time, like Jenner and I would say it around friends, and they would sit like, "Oh, well, but you're funny," and I'm like, I didn't say I wasn't. Like, I mean, apparently you think anyway, but it's one of those, right, where like to me, I could recognize, no, like Rob's really good at comedy. Like he knows where the joke is, he knows, and he's quick with it, and I think, it doesn't mean I'm not. And this is actually an area where I was talking to some friends one day. And I made that comment, and my friend Mike looked at me and he goes, he's not funnier. He's just a different kind of funny. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's true. We have a very different sense of humor. But it's always meant a lot to me that, like my initial was, oh, he's just trying to make me feel better. But because of what he had built up, because of the way that he expressed things, I believed him.
But this is a good example, right? Because when I say, how do I say I appreciate that I'm funnier than you? You didn't say, hey, Rob, you're really funny. You said, you're funnier than me. So it's kind of like, that's the narcissistic thing, because it's like, well, I'm kind of a big deal. And yes, if it comes down to competition, I will destroy you. So it's kind of funny how often I think we set ourselves up in that way.
Yeah.
Even unintentionally, of saying, you are better at this than me. instead of just saying, I really like how good you are at this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because then it, even for me, the complimenter, I'm keeping you in comparison. And for you, the listener, like, or the receiver, you have to be kept in comparison. That means, am I just inherently good at this, or am I just better at this than you? Is there only way to be good at this? It doesn't matter if there's somebody else in the room, or I'm just good at this.
Yeah. Which
So
is funny. Like I talk about this all the time with clients because they'll sit and say, well, but I'm not as good as, and I said, whoa, stop. Like, why are you comparing yourself to anybody? What does it matter? Like, do you like where you are? And if you like where you're at, then okay, you don't need to compare yourself to the guy next door.
Did I tell you guys about maybe Mike, did we talk about this? The Beatles, the podcast, the Malcolm Gladwell, the Rick Rubin one where he does it's the broken record and they talk about music stuff. But
Yeah.
Rick Rubin wrote a book on creativity. And he talks about a few things that everyone borrows at least from somebody else. Like he talked about the Beatles, he said, and the Beach Boys, he said, now I'm drawing a blank on his name, Brian Wilson?
Brian May.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Brian May is Queen. It's Brian Wilson.
Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it said that he heard Rubber Soul from the Beatles, and then he went and wrote Pet Sounds. And then the Beatles heard Pet Sounds, and they went and wrote Sgt. Pepper's. And just thinking it wasn't a matter of like, well, we have to be better than you at this. It's just saying, hey, that thing inspired me. Now it makes me want to go do this. And how often, if we could admire something in somebody that, like I've thought many times when I watch Matt's work ethic. You didn't know what I was going to say about it yet. It's terrible.
I know.
Let me finish.
I'll take it.
I was going to say, my wife has heard this many times. I'm like, I don't like Matt is so productive. Every time I show up, he's like, I built something else. I'm like, okay, man, I watched a show. Have you seen this show? But when he does it, when I see the stuff he does, I feel like, okay, I'm going to do better. I want to be like Matt level. Now, I'm not saying that like it's competition. I mean to say that's the example I have in my mind of like somebody who's like, I want to create something new. Yeah. Like this whole thing about men are happiest when they're doing these, they're building something. I actually think that's hilarious. It's in all humans that we feel better when we're making something. I think when we're being creative, that's the way I say it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean creative like I'm painting a picture. Creative could mean I'm building somebody else up. Yeah, I'm creating something out of nothing. Yeah. I think that's innate in humans. And so when I see the stuff you do, I'm like, that inspires me. Or Mike, when I watch you, like, or my friend Austin, Matt, all three of you, Matt, when you left Houston Clear Lake, Mike, with like I'm moving to Kansas City, or my friend Austin, who's like, well, I'm going to leave this place where I've been very successful and just go out on my own. And all of those, I feel like, man, I admire someone's willingness to step into the dark. Like I've done it before, but I think I was like shoved into the dark. So I feel like,
well, when you moved here,
right? That's what I mean. But in some ways, I felt like I was shoved in. I wasn't, but I could have chosen other paths. So, but even then, and it's not even to say I haven't. I'm catching myself like, well, it's not whether I have or haven't done it. When I see that, it's inspiring to me, and I feel like people should know not only that you're good at that, but that's something that is inspiring to me. Like I want more of that. That's really cool that you do that. Like I think that matters because I think it's different to just say to somebody, hey, you look nice in those pants, or even you're good at this, but to say that is meaningful to me. It's making me something more, like what you were saying earlier, Mike. It feels like, it makes me feel like, cool. Actually, we're all kind of building each other in this process. In an existence, I was just telling Matt, looking through our, YouTube comments and saying, I hate this kind of stuff. Like I hate social media. And getting into the comments of things, because it's mostly just a place where it's like, let me tell you why you're wrong about this, and you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Even though, and I don't think this was on the recording, if that person met me in real life, just by nature of the fact that they look like they're probably 23, that they would assume I know way more than they do because I have a PhD. But on YouTube, they're like, you're an idiot. It feels like, why would we do that? Like, why would you want to? Why would you want to make somebody feel terrible? Although there's this recent, some studies about, what we know about humans and how in psychology, in studies we've done in psychology, you are perceived as more intelligent if you are cynical and skeptical
Mm-hmm.
because you're saying, hey, this won't work. And so people think, oh, that guy knows what he's talking about. He said this so confidently, even though what they found is the people who have been most like highly achieving in terms of intelligence and things like that are people who are always open and very optimistic. Like, I don't know, let's see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it's funny that we, because of this collective illusion, like, well, if you're cynical, you must be smart.
You must be smart. You're seeing things we don't. Yeah.
Right. Or especially if you use vocal fry and you're cynical, then you must be smart. So I think it's exciting to think, man, I wish I kept, sorry, I was thinking because I dwell on these comments. And so I'm thinking about these comments thinking, why would you try to tear somebody down who's trying to put something good out? Like, it's not, so far, our approach to this has not been, even though I make all these jokes about this episode's brought to you by Dr. Pepper. And I would love if
garnered 0 sponsors.
Right. And I would love to have somebody pay me to do this, but I'm not trying to get rich off of this thing. Like, I enjoy doing it. I enjoy the benefits we've had, just the three of us. And I actually enjoy, even though I thought about if someone, because you said something like, well, get in the ring, whatever it was. And I thought,
I told Rob that I banged out a quick comment that was reactive and I deleted it.
Because I thought what I'd love to say back to the guy is just this phrase, well, it made a difference to that one. Like the starfish thing is like, you can't possibly throw them all back. And I think I've heard from numerous people, not like hundreds and hundreds, but I've heard from numerous people, hey, this podcast has been helpful to me. And I feel like, cool, man, then come back and keep listening. I'll keep doing it.
Right.
Like, because if it feels like it's building people up, then why would you stop that? But it's our insecurity that comes out. And now I don't know where I'm going anymore, except I get all excited about this idea of finding things that inspire me in other people and saying, hey, that inspires me. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, Mike, I typed out, get in the arena or shut your mouth. That's slick.
Oh my gosh. I kind of wish that had been left.
I kind of wish I had posted it. But to your point, though, I think like taking this a step further is going from saying, hey, you're doing a good job, or encouraging, or, I think you're going to pull this off, right? Especially when people really need to hear that because they're like doubting themselves, right? But then on top of that, saying you being you has impacted me in this way, like a thank you, right? Like that's like knitting the brotherhood together, right? Like I think pointing it out is super helpful too, but I think that takes it a step further. I bet you guys can't guess what movie I'm about to reference.
I can guess because it happened earlier.
I think
Clueless.
Over time, I've probably already said this. One of my favorite characters is Theoden, just because of his like arc through the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But like when they're in Helm's Deep, and they've just learned that like this massive army of just like Uruk-hai bred for death is going to come slaughter all of them, right? Like Theoden's walking around, just speaking really pompously about like this is Helm's Deep has never been breached, and they'll fall like water off of the rocks and all this stuff. And Aragorn's like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, we're all gonna die basically. Like, why are you saying this? And he just whips around really fast, and he's like my courage, or my men's courage, hangs by a thread. What should I say to him? Like, what's the point of all these comments of like, hey man, we're gonna die, brace for it. Why not like go down with some hope and belief, and in the fictional movie they won anyway, right? But like but partly because they had all these people that said against all odds, like, we're going to do this, right? And I'm going to show it for you. And I think that's a really, like, those are super, super powerful moments as human beings when someone's just like, I mean, even when someone shows up is like, I don't think this is going to work, but I got your back, and I love you, and I'm going down with you, right? I think there are probably, like you said, Mike, a lot of missed opportunities that way, where we can just support each other. And here's our lull.
Well,
we're letting the concrete cure.
I'm letting the profundity set in.
Because I've always been, I don't know how to phrase it. I always can spot what's not going to work. I feel like I'm the guy where we would sit and do lesson planning, and they'd be like, oh, here's this idea. And I'd be like, it's not going to work. And then I would tell them the reasons why it wouldn't work. And they'd be like, oh, you're right, it won't work. And I always felt bad because I always just felt like I was tearing him down. And it makes me wonder, like, why do we do that? Like, to me, that's different than not actively building someone up, right? Like sometimes we just choose to stay silent, right? Like I have the thought to share something and I don't say anything. But that's very different than actively saying, this is a bad idea. Like, why can't I just be the guy who says, look, I will support you in this. And it doesn't matter if I think it works. You want it, so let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why can't we be that guy?
Well, it's interesting that you say, and I would think of it this way too, like when you're saying, I can spot what won't work. Kind of like it's like a hard truth. Like here is this truth, this won't work. And I think, or it might work, and that's something you got to work around. Like it's perception and how you phrase things and saying, well, it's something we should be aware of. Like, yeah, this, I don't know if it will work, but I can see some things we're going to have to deal with as we go along. But that's very different than saying, here's why this won't work. Which is it's the cynic in us, and I do it too. Like I've done it. I was thinking here, like, oh, how many times have I done that to my kids, where they're saying, "Hey, I want to do this thing," and I say, "I mean, here's 17 obstacles."
Yeah.
And even that, I'm not saying it won't work. But their message they get from me is that won't work. Instead of saying, "Give it a shot, see what happens." Like I was thinking about when I wanted to buy a building, and my owner's like, "Rob, you don't get into this because of what you know. You get in because of what you don't know." He's like, if you knew everything up front, there's no way you'd do this. You just get in and then stuff sort of shows up and you kind of deal with it. And it's like, oh, okay. And it's actually been my approach to this hiring people on thing is like, I don't know, let's just kind of go. As long as they know up front, like, hey, I'm going to do the most I can to make sure that this works. But I don't know if it's going to work, but I want to get into it. And I want to, like, you can learn something along the way of like, how do you become your own clinician? How do you run a group practice? You'll learn with me. Like, but I've had to say, I want to guarantee you people, but I can't. So let's just get into it and see what happens. Mm-hmm. And as long as they're willing, if they don't want to do that, I think, cool, I understand that. But I want to do better about not saying, this is why this won't work, or this is what I don't like about yours, which for me, you said, Mike, why do you do that? And for me, it's usually a fear-based thing. Like either one, I'm afraid that I'll fail. So I want to highlight up front why this won't work so I don't have to fail. Or two, if somebody else proposes something and it's better than mine, I think, how do I say this is better than mine? It's kind of like in a less profound way than Lord of the Rings, Penguins of Madagascar. There's a scene that I don't know if you guys have seen it, and if you haven't, man, that movie
it's hilarious.
Is so funny. But there's a scene where they're, the North Wind, this elite rescue operation group, is proposing this plan, and they have this whole thing laid out and all this stuff, and then the Penguins propose theirs, and then they vote, and the skipper, the captain of the Penguins, when he votes, he raises his hand for the other team and he says theirs is better. And I was like, oh, here's this kind of profound moment where he says, like, because what matters to him is we get our guy out, he says theirs is better. And that's very hard for me to say, like, to not just say mine's better because I said it, instead of saying theirs is better, we should listen to what that person says, because that feels like a threat to me. But I think it's inspiring, like it's inspiring to let go, to say I don't have to be the guy in charge. Like if we're moving forward as a group, then great, even as a group of men. So that person walks out and feels like, hey, thanks for saying that. I was really nervous about proposing my idea, but when you said that would work, it felt like, okay, cool. Somebody else believes in me. And then there's this kind of mutual building that could happen if we would just open our stupid mouths more. I was going to say a different word, but I don't want to have to click the little expletive button on this. Explicitive. That's a new word. It's explicit. Iv.
This episode is exploitative.
That's going to be the title of this episode. Huh.
No, I think that that whole we were talking about this, I guess, with your windshield wipers, Mike. Like the idea that being able to say, like, you performed better, or you had a better idea, or not in comparison to me so much as like you've advanced whatever cause we have, or whatever solution we're trying to come up with, or like I think sports. It's really sad to me that professional sports doesn't have the practice of like going and like shaking hands with the other team. They shake hands with each other and congratulate each other, and the freaking losers like,
yeah, baseball, that
I'm
drives
like,
me nuts.
yeah, I'm like, I remember that as a kid playing baseball, like how good that felt to be either on the losing side or the winning side, and have like a genuine, like,
good job.
You bested me,
Yeah,
and like it was a privilege,
yeah.
right?
It was good
Like,
to be out there on the field with you, and
yeah, you made me better, or like, if you win, like enjoy your spoils, basically, right? Like it's
Yeah.
you earned it, and I think there's probably less and less of those types of interactions that really are meant to build that character that helps us to stay united despite the necessary competition of life, right? The necessary, I think there's just a necessary. We have to pit ourselves against each other in certain ways because resources are finite and all of these things. But like at the end of the day, would we still take care of each other? Would we still like come back and say, even though I had the better idea than you, I still want you to be a part of this. So, or even though you had a better idea than me, I've learned something and I'm going to continue to follow. And maybe next time I'll have the idea that advances it,
right. That's the idea of Rubber Soul and Pet Sounds and Sergeant Pepper's. They just kept advancing each other. They didn't say, well, great, you took the last one. Because there are some areas where I do think, yes, resources in some specific places are finite, but I actually think less so than we think, especially when it comes to ideas or like creativity. I think resources are pretty limitless there because they always build on each other, even when it's very similar. And as a side note, I will say in the NFL, they actually do kind of an informal, the coaches that will always go and shake hands.
Yeah.
But if you watch NFL games after the game, the players will always go, they're hugging each other from opposing teams because they all know each other from college and whatever. College, it doesn't happen so much because they hate each other's guts. But it's not formal. It's not like we line up and do it in a show.
Right.
But I do appreciate, I've always liked that in the NFL. It's like, hey, we're still friends, man. Like, it was a good game.
As much as I don't like the NBA, they do it too.
Yeah.
Like they're very good
to watch closer after games now. Because like two shows that stand out to me this way are Forged in Fire, which is freaking awesome.
I love that show, man.
Some real characters on there. But then and the British Baking Show, right? Like on that show, it's like a genuine like, I'm sad to see you go because I've grown close to you, right? Yeah. And so I wish we could keep, baking together, basically, right? Forged in Fire is like the best example of what happens after a game, right? They're like they've gotten gentler in their, this is why we are asking you to leave, right? And it's funny, some of the wording's like, surrender your weapon and leave the forge. It's like, ouch. But as they're walking away, I haven't heard a single person say anything other than they were absolutely right. And those other guys made better weapons than me. And this was an awesome experience and I learned a ton. Thank you. And, I'm like, that's awesome. And the other guys aren't like, like lording it over each other. I think that, competition's a kind of a natural area to have these types of conversations.
Well, then. There it is.
That's so good.
Well, I was actually just going to say, I was thinking about this, and we've said this on previous episodes, but I think about the people. I wouldn't just say the men, because I know there are women as well who listen to this podcast that I feel like I always, this is something I genuinely admire that I don't think I do I was just about to do it, as well as other people. But like I genuinely admire somebody who says, I want to keep getting better. And if listening to this podcast in any way makes you feel like you're doing better, I feel like, great, keep listening. But I also appreciate that I think most people I've ever met want to be good humans and like better humans. And I think, Matt, you're kind of talking about this idea of being broken or lonely or lost. And I think there's a ton of that. And I feel like I really hope that people know, like, I assume most people I meet are genuinely good people. They're just in some sort of crap. I've met a few people that I feel like, I don't see much redeemable in you. Or I hesitate to tell you this because if I do, I believe genuinely. Like I've told you guys before, I think I've known 3 narcissists, despite the fact that social media would have you believe that 90% of men are narcissists. Yeah. I've known 3. So I feel like of those three, I had a real hesitancy with ever complimenting them because I was like, I don't know where this is going to go if I do this. But other than that, I feel like people are trying. And I think of people listening to this podcast who try. And I think, man, that is something that I find, like, I think keep trying and tell other people you're trying. It's so helpful just for people to know, like, I'm trying to get better. I just want to be a better version of myself. Because then people feel like, okay, cool. I can admit that out loud too. Yeah. And it feels very encouraging. And I like this idea still. I think one of the dudes on my floor has started listening to the podcast because he came over and said and talked about going to lunch. And I'm like, yeah, I forgot to get his phone number so we can go to lunch. But he's like,
is it a therapist in your building?
No, it's just a guy. He's an IT guy.
Yeah.
And he said, he's like, sometimes I get real lonely in my office. Maybe we should go to lunch sometime. And I was like, is this the social ambassador thing? Are you doing the thing? Like you're putting it out there, man? Now, maybe I say that like, if it's a good idea about men, it probably came from me. But anyway, all this was a long way of saying, I actually, during this episode, I thought, I appreciate people who listen to this podcast and people who listen faithfully of like, not because it boosts, honestly, so far we've talked about this many times, this just costs us money. It doesn't bring us any money. But I genuinely appreciate people who feel like, I want to get better. And if this has helped me get better, then sweet, keep coming back. Mm-hmm. And come back next time on the Man Space. You look
so beautiful to me.
We've done that one before. Good one. All right. Bye-bye. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Please remember to
rate
and
review.
Please, we desperately need it.